Now we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty of what Indians are all about.
I still say we Indian people are believers in the truth. This is the way of life that was given to your people. You're born an Indian, you're going to die an Indian. Indianness is a good life. You're facing an Indian this afternoon.
Good Saturday afternoon out there, everyone. Welcome into your number one source for Native American television news, Native News Today. I'm your host, Jason Salzman, as we get set for this week's episode, and we are so glad to be back to sort of a normal format of the show, as we'll have 4 stories for you this week. Lots of great things to get to, lots of great information out there, and lots of people to talk about and what they're doing out there in Creek Country. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this first break.
Mvskoke Media has created an online survey to get feedback from you about our coverage and operations. Participants will be entered to win artwork from Mvskoke Creek artist Dana Tiger. At the beginning, you will be asked for your name, phone number, and email. The survey consists of 18 questions that are either multiple choice or in a yes or no format. Visit www.mvskokemedia.com to participate before November 30th, and winners will be announced December 1st.
And thanks for coming back with us here as we get ready to start our first feature story on this episode of Native News Today. And it takes us to Wetumpka, Oklahoma. Several months back, the Mvskoke Creek Nation National Council passed legislation to get a program going to install storm shelters for the citizens that qualify. And this was one of those citizens out there in Wetumpka, Mr. Bobby Altman. He's got an interesting story of how sort of the need arose to have a storm shelter right there at his house, and it came up from actually a storm last year, and something happened, and he and his wife were washed off the road, and basically he said, hey, I need a cellar, and he was in a position as a Creek citizen to sort of get the ball rolling, even getting this idea coming forward to have a program like this. So he talked with the councilman, and here we are. He becomes the first citizen to have his in-ground storm shelter installed from this program. We hope you enjoy the story.
We're glad to get this cellar going. We was really anxious because, like I say, we got washed off the road last year. I come home, I said, well, I guess we're going to get us a cellar. They told us that I want to give Bobby the first one because he's the one who got this started. We went up to see Rufus Scott there and talked to him about it. He got the ball rolling. We was in the house there, and the police car pulled up. I said, good Lord, what's happening? But it's Rufus, and he come in and tell me that he gave me the papers, and he said, I talked to the lady, and he said, you'll fill this one here out. So he brought it out, and then it's about, I don't know, it wasn't too long after that, probably about, maybe a month and a half. We went over there, and we filled out the papers at Mvskoke. And that's been about 3 months ago, or about 3 weeks ago or something like that. They sent us a letter there from Mvskoke, and they told us that ours would be ready, to get after it there. And that letter was probably about 2 weeks ago or something. And we filled out some more papers and stuff like that, and everything was okay. So we said, well, we'll just wait and see what's going to happen. And it happened fast. I'm real proud of it.
CRM Construction and Services, we are the contractor awarded with all the in-ground installations. I think we have 15 storm cellar installations in front of us, and we should be wrapping up with those November 2nd.
Everybody I talked to, they just was real good. They told us how to go about it and everything. And they had their stuff together when they did it. And I say all together, it might have been, maybe 3, maybe 4 months altogether at the very most, but which I thought was pretty quick considering everything. But I appreciate it. I guarantee you. They sent me that real nice letter and told me I'd been accepted and everything. And couldn't ask for anything better, I don't think. I could have been treated any better.
And we want to thank the Altmans out there in Wetumpka, Oklahoma, once again for allowing us there to be there and film the installation of their new cellar. They're so proud of it, and as you can see there, even Mr. Altman framing the letter from the Mvskoke Creek Nation. Very, very proud of that, and so it's very good to see not only a citizen but an elderly citizen have an idea, come forth to a council member, and then we have a program, and he becomes the first one. It's just a perfect story of how you can get things done here at the Mvskoke Creek Nation, and it's really neat, and it's great that we have that program now for all of those that qualify. Well, moving right along, our next story, this time of year we have a lot of awareness months. We have a lot of things that we're paying homage to, and Native American Month, breast cancer awareness, things like that. And one of them is domestic violence. And our domestic violence, family violence prevention program here at Creek Nation always does a good job this time of year with Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
So October is recognized nationally as Domestic Violence Awareness Month, a time definitely to bring special focus on domestic violence, the devastating impact on the people that are victims of domestic violence, as well as family members, our community, and just our nation as a whole. In Her Shoes is a revolutionary simulation that allows participants the opportunity to follow the experience of a real-life victim or survivor of domestic violence. They have the opportunity to be placed in groups where they are traveling throughout a victim's story. They're placed in a position to have to make decisions as well. We set up the dome, the Mvskoke Dome, with 17 stations representing shelter, a home, the hospital, a courtroom, something different this year. While the simulation itself includes a funeral home setting. One of our staff, Allison McCall, had reached out to a local funeral home, and they agreed to provide a demo casket, and so which I think was kind of alarming for people at first, surprising when coming into the dome. But then realizing the purpose for it being there, I think really increased kind of the reality of the fact that domestic violence is deadly. It's can be very lethal, and there are high rates of homicide due to domestic violence. Domestic violence has a devastating impact on our people. We are busier now than our program has ever been. That is a positive thing because the promotion, the awareness, the outreach that we have done within the nation, it's more than we've ever done before. So of course that is leading to increased numbers of calls for assistance, because people are more aware that domestic violence is not okay. It threatens people's lives, their livelihood, their well-being. It impacts children. We have, with the high rates of domestic violence that are occurring, we have significant numbers of our children that are growing up in homes where they're being exposed to violence. And so we know through a great deal of research that exposure to violence dramatically impacts children. It affects their growth and development, their emotional and physical well-being. And so when we have children that are growing up in those situations, the impact of that trauma can be lifelong. So obviously, that's impacting our community and our nation as a whole. And then certainly victims are at great risk for a variety of injuries. Often when we're talking about domestic violence, we're recognizing the physical impacts as far as injuries, but it also has a very devastating, or can have a very devastating impact on someone's emotional well-being. And so we're seeing the impact of that trauma manifest in depression or other negative mental health conditions, as well as increasing the potential for suicide, as well as people in trying to cope with the trauma that they've experienced are more likely to use substances to in order to deal with their experiences. So I think that if we are really realistic and our eyes are open and we're looking at what's happening, that we can see the impact from domestic violence in almost every area within our nation in terms of services that we're providing, the impact on our healthcare system. We have people, coming to seek medical treatment for injuries that they've sustained due to domestic violence. So it really impacts every facet, unfortunately, of our nation. And it, when the well-being and safety of our women and children are at stake, obviously that's a tremendous threat, to the strength of our nation. So if anyone that's watching this is in an abusive relationship, or maybe they have experienced abuse in the past, whether it's domestic violence, sexual assault, we want to encourage them to contact our office at 918-732-7979. We have a variety of services and support that can help to address their safety issues and concerns. There's never any expectation from our staff for anyone to do anything that they don't want to. We're here to be a support, to not judge, to make sure they have information about their options, the available resources. We also really are trying to increase the availability of support for people that maybe have experienced a trauma in their past. Maybe they're not right now in an abusive relationship, or maybe they've experienced, sexual assault as a child or many years ago. So we're working to increase the number of ways that we can provide support, whether that's through support groups, so that, people have a place to be able to go and feel supported in their healing journey. So.
Okay, and as you can see there, once again, we've had her on the program several times, Miss Shawn Partridge, the Mvskoke Creek Nation Family Violence Prevention Program, does a great job as far as being advocates for this month and raising awareness, and also advocates for their clients and those people that need their services. So great job by Shawn there, and as we see, the walk a mile in her shoes, it's always been a big event around Mvskoke Creek Nation, and that story was given to us by Devin Lexinger this week, so we want to thank her for that as well. Well, moving on to our next story for today, it takes us over to the complex at the Mvskoke Creek Nation Cultural Preservation Department. Not only are they preserving culture, but also in an interesting way. They're using GIS and geospatial technologies to locate and identify cemeteries. Also a cemetery crew there. We'll let them tell you a little bit about the program.
Whenever there are reports of graves found, we will first ask the person giving us the information to fill out our application form. It's a simple 2-page application which describes the whereabouts of the the graves, and we have to verify to make sure they are Creek Nation related graves. Then we will also turn that into our cemetery crew, and if there's any fencing that needs done, that if it's been vandalized or cattle has knocked over headstones, they will also put up a fence to secure that cemetery. Right now, our main focus is to get every cemetery within all of our jurisdiction GPS logged. That way we know where the cemeteries are. That way we can protect them from federal undertakings, pipelines, power lines, any kind of highway expansions. And that's our main purpose, to get every cemetery GPS'd. Now, sometimes we'll have some extra time to go in there and further document the cemeteries down to the headstone. So we'll GPS every single headstone and turn that into a database, the date they were born, the date that they passed away, the county that it's in, the first name, last name, any information we can collect, the type of material that the headstone is, granite, marble, grave house. That's one of the big ones. We want to make sure we know where the grave houses are. That way, in the event of a fire, grave houses are lost. So if you lose that, you lose kind of everything, unless you know somebody that knows exactly where they're at. So GPS is a integral part in keeping record of these cemeteries. That's one thing we need to report out to people, is if they know they have a cemetery, a family cemetery on their property, their family, whether it be restricted or in trust, they need to get with the realty department to get that put in to the deed. That way it's a legal document, stating that, hey, there is a cemetery there. Otherwise, the only thing we have to work off of is our GPS point that we took out there with photographical evidence and all the other paperwork documentation that we take within surveying these cemeteries.
And thank you to Mr. Perez and all of his people over there, and they're doing a great job. And as you can see, getting out in the sticks and really using, as I said, geospatial to map places, identify, and really log these things so that we have them. It's a great program there, and we'll continue to see more stories coming out from them, as well as people that are needing their services. So it's a great thing. We want to thank them again for having us over. Our last feature this week brings us to another, as I said earlier, awareness of this time of year. A lot of months out there are dedicated at this time of year to different causes, social issues, as I said, but also health issues like breast cancer. We recently had the Pink Party. It's one of our biggest events here at Mvskoke Creek Nation every year. Just raise awareness, raise money, raise any kind of research that we can for breast cancer awareness. And this is an interesting story about a citizen and her mother.
I came home and I knew something was wrong. Like, my mom was just not acting okay. And it was around Christmas, and of course, I was young. I remember that day so vividly because she set me down and she was like, "Logan, you remember how I've been kind of sick and we've been going to the doctor a lot?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "I have cancer." And it was like, what's that, Mom? Like, she had to explain it all over to me over and over again in my head. I just remember thinking, what is cancer? Like, what's it gonna do? How am I gonna get past? Like, I was little, so I didn't understand really what was coming. I didn't understand how big it was. And so as I went, it got better, but I wasn't really for sure. I just know that when she set me down, her face was just pale. And I'd never seen my mom talk to me about something so serious. After learning what it was going to do and like how bad it was terrifying. I think it made us best friends. We went through everything, just me and her pretty much. We had a lot of family and friends, which was amazing. Without them, we wouldn't have done it, but it was just me and my mom. So we were best friends anyways, and going through that made us so much closer. I got to go to a couple chemo treatments with her, which nobody was supposed to be back there. The nurse became friends with my mom. She snuck me back there, And I sat for hours while she got chemo sometimes, and I would color with her, and she would just pull me out of school just to do that with her because I didn't know at the time how much time we were gonna have. She was so far into her diagnosis. I mean, she was at stage 3B, so that's pretty far into what was going on. And at the time, it wasn't something I was really thinking about, losing my mom, but spending a lot of more time with her was really nice. Now we're best friends. I mean, we do everything together still. Every year we go to the American Cancer Society Relay for Life, and we just spend the whole day together, and we try and fundraise and do things like that, and it's just so nice because still to this day, I don't think we would have had that bond had I not almost lost her, because there's a difference in when you love somebody and they're there all the time, and then when you think you might lose them. So she became my best friend after all that. It was really hard because I was doing tumbling, and it was my first power tumbling meet, and my mom missed it. She was in bed one time, and it was like for 2 weeks because she couldn't move. Her chemo was called the Red Devil, and it was the one that was starting to make her really, really sick. So she didn't get to come to a couple of those things, but through my mom's entire year of super hard chemo and radiation and cancer, she came to pretty much everything. It was hard for kids because they didn't understand, and I got kind of bullied about it for a little bit because why was my mom bald, like when I went to places, or when I would come into school and my mom would be with me, oh, is that your dad? You know, boys would ask, and it's like, you know, you don't have to be mean because my mom's bald. So it was hard to be like normal in that sense because a lot of people didn't understand what was going on. I had a lot of really good friends, and their moms took care of me. If it wasn't for a lot of my friends and their parents, I don't know what I would have done, because without them, I literally would not be here. So it was cold outside, and I was jumping on the trampoline, and my mom called me in, and she's like, Logan, come inside. And I ran in, and she had scissors and a pair of clippers in her hands, and she's like, we're shaving my hair. And I was like, what? And she's like, she ran her fingers through her hair, and a bunch, like a big wad of it came out, and she said, I can't do it anymore. And I was like, okay. And at the time, I was like, this is so cool, I'm cutting my mom's hair. So I'm cutting it all off, and I fell in love with the way the scissors felt in my hands. And I cut it off, and at the time, I was just cutting away, and then we just took, you know, clippers to it, and she was bald after that. My mom had nothing left, you know, the little bit of spikes that were gonna fall away on her pillow later that night because the chemo was just taking everything from her. So I remember, even to this day, like, that is what got me into this. If it wasn't for my mom, I don't know if I would have found my passion, and I love doing hair. Like, it is, everything about me is because of it, and I started it because she had to lose all of hers. And at the time, I wasn't thinking about it. I know that when I was little, it was just like, I was having fun. It didn't hit me emotionally until about a week later. I was looking at her, and she just wasn't my mom anymore. You don't realize how much hair does for you. And I remember just sitting back and looking at her thinking, oh my, what if I was bald? Would I still feel beautiful? Like, would I still feel, I felt so, my heart was broken because when I looked at her, she just didn't look like my mom anymore. It was cool to get to do all of it, but the aftermath and the sitting back part of it, looking like that's not my mom. That's not what she looks like. And a week later, we had gone to a fair, and my mom she was talking to me, and when she turned around, he was like, oh, 1050, sir. And she just turned around, she just kind of looked, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry. And that's when I was like, hair defines a person. I mean, it really does. It can. If you let it define you, it can. And to me, it's just hair. You know, for her, she had long, beautiful locks. I mean, she had never cut it short. It was who she was. She had that big, long, curly hair, and she loved it. And so when she lost it, she lost who she was. And she was really, really lost for a little bit, but she took it like a champ, and she had beautiful head, and she just showed me positivity. And it made me feel like anybody can be beautiful no matter what, because even though she was sick, she still tried to draw her eyebrows on, and she still tried to, you know, put a little hat on to make herself look better, and she would get up every day and go to the store. No matter how she felt, she would do it. So I don't know, the emotion was sad for a little bit, but then it was empowering. It kind of showed me that you can do what you want to do no matter how you look. She has been in remission for 11 years now, so that's such a good feeling to even say. She's when she came home and after her mastectomy, she came home and she had to start radiation. It wasn't until after tons and tons of radiation that she finally got to say that she was cancer-free. And when I heard those words, it was so nice, because I didn't know what was gonna happen. To think about, like, 6 months before that, she had set me down and she'd asked me, Logan, if something happens, who do you want to live with? And I'm like, what do you mean, who am I going to live with? Mom, I'm going to live, what do you mean? She's like, Logan, it's getting really bad, and the diagnosis that I have is a really hard one. It was called HER2, it's a Herceptin, and it was a really bad form of cancer. And I was like, okay. She's like, so if something happens to me, where do you want to live? And I remember when she came home and she was in remission, those words were playing through my head. Where do you want to live? Where do you want to live? And it's like, I get to keep my mom. Like, she beat this. She worked. She fought so hard and so long, and she beat it. And it was such a good feeling, because I got to keep her. She was my person. Like, I don't have anybody else. Like, I just have her. So it was nice when she came home. We were jumping up and down, and we went, it was so much fun. I remember hugging her for what felt like ever. And sometimes, like once a year, when that American Cancer Society comes around, that Relay for Life, and I get to just hug her again because we're another year down, like, it's the best feeling in the whole world. It is so important to get your mammograms. I cannot stress that enough. I cannot monthly breast exams. Check yourself every month. When you're in the shower, give yourself a breast exam, men and women. You would be amazed at how many men get breast cancer. It is such a big deal. If my mom would not have seen that lump and seen that when she went, she didn't even know she had a lump. She got a mammogram, and that's how she found out. That mammogram saved her life. Had she not had that, I don't know what we would have done. And if it wasn't for Creek Nation, we would have never been able to do that. So we were extremely, extremely grateful that they got her there to see what was going on. She later got on Project Women. If you have never heard of Project Women, everyone needs to visit it, men and women both, because they give free mammograms at hospitals around Oklahoma. And if you don't have insurance, if you can't afford it, that gives you a reason.
And that's going to wrap up another episode of Native News Today. We want to thank you all for joining us and being back to our normal sort of story schedule here on the show. We want to thank you for sticking with us through all the debates, all the candidate profiles. We are totally done with those as the unofficial election results are in. You can check those out on MvskokeMedia.com. And you can also check us out on all of our social media sites. Just search Native News Today, Mvskoke Nation News from Mvskoke Media. We'll take you to all of our sites there. Look around, see what's happening at the Mvskoke Creek Nation, as we are covered on all of it: Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram. You all have a great week out there, and if you're not subscribed to us on YouTube, do that as well. We'll see you guys next time.